The transport ship descended through the atmosphere of New Haven, its sleek hull reflecting the light of the colony world's twin suns. Inside the luxury cabin, Princess Vela of the Celestian Empire sat with perfect posture, her crystalline blue skin shimmering slightly as she reviewed the diplomatic files on her datapad. Her silver eyes moved across the screen with practiced efficiency, taking in every detail about the humans she would soon meet. Vela had lived for 3 centuries, which was still considered young by Celestian standards. She had trained in diplomacy, psychic arts, and political strategy since childhood. This mission to negotiate with the humans was supposed to be a simple task, something to add to her credentials before she took on more important responsibilities within the Empire. Humans were a new species on the galactic stage, barely 200 years into space travel. They were primitive compared to the Celestians, who had ruled their corner of the galaxy for over 10,000 years. The ship landed smoothly at the diplomatic complex in New Haven's capital city. Vela stood, her flowing robes adjusting automatically to her movement. She stepped out of the cabin and made her way to the exit ramp, her 2 Celestian guards following silently behind her. As the ramp lowered, she saw the welcoming committee waiting on the landing platform. Several human officials stood in formal attire, smiling and preparing to greet her. Vela extended her psychic senses out of habit, reading the surface emotions of those present. She felt nervousness, excitement, and hope radiating from the humans. Simple creatures, she thought, so easy to read and understand. Behind the officials, she noticed a man standing slightly apart from the group. He wore dark tactical clothing and had a weapon holstered at his side. His face was neutral, showing no emotion at all. The head of the human delegation, a woman named Linda Hayes, stepped forward with a warm smile. "Princess Vela, welcome to New Haven. We are honored by your presence and grateful that the Celestian Empire has agreed to these negotiations." Vela inclined her head slightly, the barest acknowledgement of respect. "I bring greetings from Queen Sereth and the Celestian High Council. We hope these talks will prove beneficial to both our peoples." Linda gestured to the man in tactical gear. "This is Jake Morrison. He will be your personal security officer during your stay on New Haven." Vela's silver eyes fixed on Jake for a moment. He met her gaze steadily, gave a small nod, and said nothing. She felt a flash of irritation. "That will not be necessary. I have my own guards, and I am perfectly capable of defending myself. I am a trained psychic warrior of the Celestian Empire." Linda's smile became slightly strained. "Of course, Princess. However, as you are a guest on our world, we would feel more comfortable if one of our own people was assigned to your protection detail. It's standard procedure for visiting dignitaries. Jake is one of our best." Vela wanted to refuse outright, but she remembered her mother's instructions about maintaining diplomatic courtesy. She gave a slight gesture of acceptance, though her displeasure was clear. "Very well, but he is to stay out of my way." Jake spoke for the first time, his voice calm and professional. "Understood, Princess. I'll do my job and try not to be a bother." Something in his tone annoyed Vela even more, though she could not quite identify what it was. She turned away from him and walked toward the waiting vehicle, her robes flowing behind her. Jake fell into step several paces behind her, his movements quiet and efficient. The journey to the diplomatic residence took 20 minutes through the city. Vela stared out the window, studying the human architecture with mild interest. It was functional, but lacked the artistic elegance of Celestian structures. Everything about this place seemed rushed and temporary, as if the humans had not quite figured out how to build something meant to last. At the residence, Vela was shown to her quarters. The rooms were spacious and had been decorated in an attempt to accommodate Celestian preferences. She noted the effort but found it lacking. Jake positioned himself outside her door, standing with his back to the wall where he could watch the corridor in both directions. Vela sent her Celestian guards away and approached Jake. "You do not need to stand there all night. I have psychic alarms set throughout these rooms. I will know if anyone approaches with hostile intent." Jake looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "That's good, Princess. I'll still be here, though. Just doing my job." She frowned. Do you not trust my abilities? It's not about trust, Jake said simply. It's about making sure you're safe. That's what I'm here for. Vela found his attitude irritating but said nothing more. She went into her quarters and closed the door, extending her psychic senses to scan the area around her rooms. Everything felt calm and safe. The human was being overly cautious for no reason. The next 3 days passed in a blur of meetings and diplomatic receptions. Vela sat through endless discussions about trade agreements, resource sharing, and mutual defense pacts. The humans were eager, almost desperate for an alliance with the Celestian Empire. They wanted access to advanced technology and the protection that came with being associated with a major galactic power. Jake was always present, always watching. He stood against walls, positioned himself near exits, and kept his eyes moving constantly across any room Vela entered. She found his presence increasingly annoying. Several times she tried to dismiss him, but he politely refused, citing his orders and his responsibility. On the 4th day, a formal reception was held at the governor's mansion. Representatives from various human colonies attended, along with officials from several other species who had interests in the sector. Vela wore her finest ceremonial robes and arrived with her usual grace and confidence. Jake conducted a security sweep of the reception hall before she entered. When he returned, his expression was troubled. "Princess, I have some concerns about the security arrangements here. The governor's people are good, but there are a lot of entry points and the guest list is longer than I'd like." Vela dismissed his concerns with a wave of her hand. "I have already scanned the area psychically. There are no hostile intentions among any of the guests present. Your worries are unfounded. Princess, with respect, sometimes threats don't show up on psychic scans. There are technologies designed specifically to block detection." She looked at him with barely concealed contempt. "I have 300 years of training in psychic arts. I think I know how to detect danger better than a human security guard." Jake held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, Princess." But he did not move from his position near her, and his hand stayed close to his weapon. The reception proceeded smoothly for the first hour. Vela spoke with various dignitaries, accepted their compliments, and discussed the ongoing negotiations with practiced ease. She noticed Jake had positioned himself where he could watch both her and the main entrance to the hall. The human was paranoid, she decided. These people were all screened and cleared. Then everything went wrong in an instant. A waiter carrying a tray of drinks approached the group where Vela was standing. She had seen him several times during the evening and paid him no attention. He was 5 feet away when Jake suddenly moved. The human crossed the distance with startling speed, shoving Vela aside just as the waiter dropped his tray and pulled a weapon from beneath it. The plasma blast that would have struck Vela hit Jake instead. His body armor absorbed most of the impact, but she saw him stagger from the force of it. The weapon was designed to penetrate energy shields and psychic barriers, technologies that would have left Vela defenseless. Jake did not fall. Instead, he drew his own weapon with his left hand while his right arm, badly burned from the plasma blast, hung at his side. He fired twice. Both shots hit the assassin in the chest, dropping him instantly. Then Jake stepped forward, putting himself between Vela and the fallen attacker, his weapon still raised and ready. The hall erupted into chaos. Guards rushed forward. Guests screamed and fled, and alarms began blaring throughout the building. Jake spoke calmly into his communication device, calling for medical assistance and a security lockdown. Only then did he lower his weapon. Vela stared at him in shock. The human had been wounded, possibly seriously, and yet he had not hesitated. He had thrown himself into harm's way to protect her. In Celestian culture, personal survival was the highest priority. Warriors were trained to eliminate threats efficiently, not to sacrifice themselves for others. "You are injured," she said, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. Jake glanced down at his burned arm, then back at her. "I'll be fine, Princess. Are you hurt?" "No, I am unharmed. Because of you." She felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Shame, perhaps, for having dismissed his concerns. Gratitude for his protection, and something else she could not quite name. Medical personnel arrived and insisted on taking Jake to the hospital. He tried to refuse, saying his duty was to stay with the princess, but Vela ordered him to go. "I will be safe now. Go and have your wounds treated." As they led Jake away, Vela stood in the damaged reception hall surrounded by nervous guards and shaken diplomats. She replayed the moment in her mind again and again. The speed of Jake's response. His willingness to take the hit meant for her. His immediate action to neutralize the threat even while wounded. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft beeping of medical monitors. Vela stood outside the door, hesitating in a way that was completely unlike her. Celestian nobles did not visit their servants or guards when they were injured. It simply was not done. Yet here she was at 3 a.m, unable to sleep because she kept seeing Jake throw himself in front of that plasma blast. She had dismissed her own guards, telling them she needed time alone to meditate. They had accepted this without question. Now she pushed open the door to Jake's room and stepped inside. Jake was awake, sitting up slightly in the hospital bed. His right arm was wrapped in regenerative bandages that glowed faintly with healing energy. He looked at her with mild surprise but said nothing. "I wanted to see how you were recovering," Vela said, feeling awkward. This was not something she had any practice with. "I'm doing fine, Princess. The doctors say I'll be back on duty in a couple of days. The burns weren't as bad as they looked." She moved closer to the bed, studying him with her psychic senses. She could feel pain radiating from his injured arm, though his face showed nothing. "You are in considerable pain. Why do you hide it?" Jake shrugged slightly with his good shoulder. "Comes with the job. No point complaining about it." "I do not understand you," Vela said, and the admission felt strange on her lips. "You knew that weapon was designed to kill. You knew your armor might not be enough. Yet you still moved to intercept it. Why would you risk your life for mine? Like I said, it's my job. No." Vela shook her head firmly. "It is more than that. A job is something you do for payment. What you did was sacrifice. You chose my life over your own survival. That is not simply employment." Jake was quiet for a moment, looking at his bandaged arm. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "I guess for humans, some things are worth more than personal survival. You were under my protection. That means something to us." "Explain what it means." He seemed to struggle with finding the right words. "It means that once I accept responsibility for someone's safety, I don't get to choose when that responsibility ends or what price is too high to pay. It means I do whatever it takes to keep them alive, even if it costs me. It's about honor, I guess. About being someone others can rely on." Vela sat down in the chair beside his bed, forgetting protocol entirely. In Celestian culture, individual survival is paramount. We are taught from childhood that our own life is the most valuable thing we possess. To throw it away for another would be considered foolish, even shameful. Yet you speak of it as if it is honorable. "Different cultures, different values," Jake said. "We humans have always been pack animals, I suppose. We survive by taking care of each other. A soldier doesn't abandon their unit. A parent doesn't abandon their child. A protector doesn't abandon the person they've sworn to protect. It's just how we're built." She studied his face, searching for any sign of deception or pride, but found only quiet sincerity. "Tell me about human history. I have read the official reports, but I want to hear it from you. Tell me about this concept of sacrifice." Jake talked for the next hour, and Vela listened with growing fascination. He told her about ancient battles, where small groups of humans held impossible positions against overwhelming odds, buying time for others to escape. He spoke of soldiers who had thrown themselves on grenades to save their companions. He described firefighters who ran into burning buildings and parents who faced down predators to protect their children. "There was this place called Thermopylae," Jake said, his eyes distant with memory. "Ancient Earth, thousands of years ago. 300 soldiers held a mountain pass against an army of thousands. They knew they were going to die. They knew no help was coming. But they held that line anyway because their country needed time to prepare its defenses. Every single one of them died, but they became legends. because they stood when running would have been the smart choice. That is insane, Vela said, but her voice lacked conviction. Maybe, Jake agreed, but it's also what makes us human. We're not the strongest species in the galaxy. We don't have psychic powers or natural armor or the ability to survive in vacuum. What we have is the ability to look at impossible odds and say, not today. What we have is each other's backs. Vela left the hospital as dawn was breaking over New Haven. Her mind was churning with new ideas and uncomfortable questions. She had been raised to believe that Celestians were superior in every way that mattered. They lived longer, possessed greater powers, and built more advanced civilizations. But Jake's words had planted a seed of doubt. Over the following days, as Jake recovered, Vela began to observe humans more carefully. She watched how they interacted with each other. She saw human soldiers training together, moving as coordinated units rather than as individuals. She noticed how human families protected their young with a fierce devotion that went beyond mere biological instinct. She saw human workers helping a colleague who had fallen behind on a project, even though it meant staying late themselves. She watched human friends laugh together and support each other through difficulties. Everywhere she looked, she saw humans creating bonds and honoring those bonds with actions rather than just words. One afternoon, she was walking through the diplomatic complex gardens when she came across a group of human children playing. They were engaged in some kind of game that involved teams trying to capture a flag from each other. Vela stopped to watch, curious about what she might learn. One small boy tripped and fell hard on the pathway, scraping his knees badly. He started to cry from the pain. Immediately, children from both teams stopped playing and rushed over to help him. They ignored the game entirely, focused only on making sure their friend was okay. One girl ran to get an adult, while others helped the boy to a bench and tried to comfort him. Vela realized she was seeing that same instinct Jake had described. These children, barely old enough to understand complex ideas, already knew that you stopped everything to help someone who was hurt. It was not something they had to think about. It was simply what they did. Jake returned to duty 3 days after the incident. His arm was still healing, but he insisted he was fit for work. The moment he resumed his position as her guard, Vela felt something she had not expected to feel. She felt safer. It was an illogical emotion, since her psychic abilities were far more powerful than any weapon he carried. But logic did not seem to matter. They attended another diplomatic function, this one with much tighter security. A Celestian, noble named Corvin, approached Vela during the event. He was an older politician from one of the great houses, and he looked at Jake with barely concealed contempt. "I see you still keep your pet human nearby," Corvin said in the Celestian language, which he assumed Jake could not understand. "It is beneath your station to rely on such primitive creatures for protection. They are little more than clever animals." Vela felt anger flash through her, surprising herself with its intensity. She responded in the common trade language so Jake could understand. "Jake Morrison saved my life. He took a weapon strike meant for me without hesitation. There is nothing primitive about his courage or his honor." Corvin's expression showed shock that she had responded in trade language, making her defense of the human public. "You have spent too much time among them, Princess. You are beginning to forget what separates us from lesser species. Perhaps what separates us is not as important as what we can learn from each other," Vela said coldly. "Jake, we are leaving." As they walked away, Jake said quietly, "You didn't have to do that, Princess. I've heard worse." "That is not acceptable," Vela replied firmly. "You serve with honor. You deserve respect." She saw something change in Jake's expression, a warmth in his eyes that had not been there before. "Thank you, Princess. That means a lot." That night, Vela could not stop thinking about her confrontation with Corvin. She had defended a human publicly, against a noble of her own people. Her mother would be furious if she heard about it. The court would whisper about the princess who had gone native among the primitives. But as she replayed the moment in her mind, she felt no regret. She had spoken the truth. Jake had proven himself worthy of respect through his actions. If her people could not see that, then perhaps it was her people who needed to change their perspective, not her. She realized she was beginning to understand something fundamental about humans. Their strength was not individual. It was collective. They became more than the sum of their parts when they worked together, when they committed to protecting each other. A single human might be weak compared to a Celestian warrior, but humans never fought as individuals. They fought as units, as teams, as brothers and sisters in arms. And that kind of strength, Vela was beginning to believe, might be more powerful than psychic abilities or advanced technology. It was a strength that came from the heart rather than the mind, from loyalty rather than logic. Jake continued his duties with quiet professionalism. He never asked for thanks or recognition. He simply did his job, day after day, always watching for threats and always ready to step between danger and those under his protection. Vela found herself trusting him in a way she had never trusted anyone. The intelligence report landed on Jake's desk at 4 a.m. He had been awake anyway, reviewing security protocols for the upcoming week. As he read through the document, his expression grew darker with each page. The assassination attempt on Princess Vela had not been an isolated incident. It was part of something much larger. He immediately contacted his superior, Colonel Lisa Grant, who arrived at the security office within 20 minutes. They spread the documents across the conference table and began piecing together the puzzle. The assassin had diplomatic credentials that checked out as legitimate, Lisa said, pointing to one section of the report. But our tech people traced them back to a forgery operation. Someone with access to high-level Celestian security codes created those documents. Jake nodded grimly. The weapon he used was Celestian military technology, not something you can buy on the black market. Whoever sent him had serious resources and connections. There's more, Lisa continued, pulling up another file on her datapad. Our intelligence network has picked up chatter about a faction within the Celestian court that opposes the alliance with humanity. They see us as a threat to their position in the galaxy. They're not wrong, Jake said. If this alliance goes through, humans get access to Celestian technology and political backing. That changes the balance of power in this entire sector. Lisa looked at him seriously. The question is, how far are they willing to go to stop it? Are we looking at more assassination attempts or something bigger? Before Jake could answer, his communication device chimed with an urgent message. He read it quickly and felt his stomach tighten. Queen Sareth is coming to New Haven. She's going to personally oversee the final negotiations. When? 3 days from now. Lisa and Jake exchanged looks of concern. The Queen's arrival changed everything. If the conspirators were willing to kill a princess, what would they do when they had a chance to eliminate the ruler of the entire Celestian Empire? Jake went to brief Princess Vela immediately. He found her in her quarters, already awake and working on diplomatic documents. She listened to his report with growing unease. My mother is coming here? Vela set down her datapad and stood, pacing the room. That is unusual. She rarely leaves the imperial capital for anything less than a major crisis. Does she know about the assassination attempt on you? Jake asked. Of course, I sent a full report immediately after it happened. Vela paused, then added quietly. She was not pleased that a human guard saved my life. In her eyes, it reflects poorly on our own security capabilities. Jake felt a flash of irritation, but kept his voice neutral. With respect, Princess, I don't care about reflecting well or poorly. I care about keeping you alive. And now I need to keep your mother alive too. That's going to be a lot harder if she comes here with the same attitude. Vela smiled slightly. My mother is considerably more set in her ways than I am. She has ruled for 2,000 years and has very firm opinions about humanity's place in the galaxy. Over the next 3 days, Jake and his security team worked around the clock to prepare for Queen Sareth's arrival. They reviewed every access point, screened every person who would come within 100 meters of the Queen, and set up multiple layers of security. Jake personally inspected everything twice. He also spent time with Vela, trying to understand more about the political situation within the Celestian court. She explained that there were several noble houses who had grown wealthy and powerful under the current system. An alliance with humanity threatened that system because it would open up new trade routes and opportunities that these houses did not control. They see humans as upstarts, Vela said. Young, aggressive, and hungry for advancement. Everything that threatens their comfortable positions. So they'd rather kill you and your mother than lose some of their wealth and influence? Welcome to politics, Jake. Power is the only currency that truly matters, and people will do terrible things to keep it. Jake thought about this as he continued his preparations. He had fought in wars, seen the worst that combat could bring, but somehow political assassination seemed even more cowardly. At least in war you faced your enemy directly. Queen Sereth's ship arrived exactly on schedule. It was a massive vessel, far larger and more impressive than the transport that had brought Vela. Jake watched it land from the security control center, noting every detail of its approach and the deployment of the Queen's personal guard. The Celestian guards were impressive. They moved with perfect coordination, their armor gleaming and their weapons held with practiced ease. They also looked at the human security personnel with obvious disdain. Jake could see the tension building immediately. He met with the captain of the Queen's Guard, a tall Celestian warrior named Ravek, who had cold silver eyes and an expression of perpetual disapproval. Their conversation did not go well. "We will handle all security for Queen Sereth," Ravek stated flatly. "Your human personnel will maintain their distance." Jake kept his voice calm and professional. "Captain Ravek, with respect, this is our planet. We know the territory, the potential threats, and the security infrastructure. We need to coordinate our efforts. Humans are not qualified to protect Celestian royalty. The attempt on Princess Vela's life proves this." Jake felt his jaw tighten but maintained his composure. "The attempt on Princess Vela's life was stopped by a human. I took the hit that was meant for her. Maybe you should consider that before dismissing our capabilities." Ravek's expression showed surprise, then something that might have been grudging respect. "You are the one called Morrison?" "I am. The princess mentioned you in her report. She said you acted with honor." Ravek paused, then added stiffly, "Perhaps we can coordinate our security efforts, but my warriors will have final authority over the Queen's protection." It was not the cooperation Jake had hoped for, but it was better than nothing. They spent the next several hours going over security plans, arguing about protocols, and eventually reaching uncomfortable compromises. That evening, there was a formal dinner to welcome Queen Sereth to New Haven. Jake positioned his team throughout the dining hall, coordinating with Ravek's Celestian guards. The Queen entered with regal grace, her presence commanding immediate attention from everyone in the room. She looked ancient and powerful, with crystalline skin that had a deeper blue tint than her daughter's, and silver eyes that seemed to see through everything they touched. Jake felt the weight of her psychic presence like a physical force. This was someone who had ruled an empire for 2 millennia, and it showed in every movement and gesture. Princess Vela greeted her mother with formal courtesy, and they spoke, briefly in the Celestian language before taking their seats at the head table. Jake noticed that the Queen's eyes found him in the crowd, studying him with obvious curiosity. He met her gaze steadily, knowing that showing weakness or fear would only confirm whatever low opinion she already held of humans. The dinner proceeded, formally, with speeches about cooperation and mutual benefit. Jake watched everything carefully, his eyes constantly scanning the room for threats. His team was doing the same, each person focused on their assigned sector. It was his team member, a sharp-eyed woman named Kate Price, who noticed something wrong. She spoke urgently into the communication network. "Jake, we have a problem. 3 of the servers are showing up on facial recognition as having fake credentials, the same type of forgeries used by the first assassin." Jake's mind went into overdrive. 3 assassins meant a coordinated attack, not a lone gunman. They would have overlapping fields of fire, backup weapons, and probably a planned escape route. He needed to act fast, but could not cause a panic that might trigger the attack prematurely. He moved smoothly through the crowd toward the head table, keeping his body language casual. He caught Princess Vela's eye and gave her a subtle signal they had worked out for emergencies. Her expression did not change, but he saw understanding flash in her silver eyes. Vela leaned toward her mother and whispered something. The Queen's expression showed annoyance, but she nodded slightly. Vela stood gracefully and announced that she needed to show her mother something in private, a cultural artifact that had arrived as a gift. It was a thin excuse, but it gave Jake the opportunity he needed. As the two Celestian royals moved toward a side door with their guards, Jake spoke into his communication device. All teams converge on the identified targets. Non-lethal takedown, if possible. But do not let them reach for their weapons. Execute now. His team moved simultaneously. Kate and two other officers approached the servers from different angles, their movements quick but not panicked. The first server saw them coming and made a break for it, dropping his tray and reaching under his jacket. Kate fired her stun weapon, dropping him before he could draw his gun. The second assassin tried to draw his weapon but was tackled by a human security officer who had positioned himself perfectly. They went down hard, struggling on the floor, until backup arrived to restrain him. The third assassin was the most dangerous. He was closer to the side door where the Queen and Princess had exited. He pulled his weapon and fired toward them, but Jake was already moving. He threw himself in front. The secure conference room was silent except for the hum of electronic security measures. Jake stood before Queen Sareth and Princess Vela, his armor still showing scorch marks from the plasma blast he had taken. His entire body ached, but he maintained his professional posture. Queen Sareth studied him with those ancient silver eyes. "You were wounded protecting my daughter. Now you have been wounded again protecting us both. This is twice you have placed yourself in harm's way for my family." "Yes, Your Majesty," Jake replied simply. "Why?" It was the same question Vela had asked him in the hospital, but coming from the Queen, it felt heavier somehow. "Because it's my duty to protect those under my care. Because your safety matters. Because it's the right thing to do." "Interesting," the Queen said softly. She turned to her daughter. "Vela, you have spent time with this human. You have observed their culture. Tell me truthfully, do you believe this alliance with humanity is wise?" Vela did not hesitate.
"Yes, Mother."
"I believe humans have something valuable to offer. Not just their technology or their resources, but their character. They fight for each other in ways we have forgotten." The Queen's expression remained neutral. "We have not forgotten how to fight. The Celestian Empire has conquered entire star systems." "Conquered, yes," Vela said carefully. "But when was the last time a Celestian warrior sacrificed themselves for another? When did we last value loyalty above personal survival? Jake has shown me that there are different kinds of strength." Queen Sareth was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. "Very well. We will proceed with the negotiations. But I want increased security for the signing ceremony. These assassination attempts suggest a coordinated effort to stop this alliance." Jake and his team spent the next 2 days working with Ravek and the Celestian guards to create the most comprehensive security plan possible. The signing ceremony would take place in the main diplomatic hall, with representatives from both species present, along with observers from several neutral governments. They screened everyone who would attend 3 separate times. They installed additional scanners and positioned guards at every entrance and exit. They ran simulation drills and practiced emergency evacuation procedures. Jake barely slept, running on coffee and determination. On the morning of the ceremony, he briefed his team one final time. "We know there are people who want to stop this alliance. We've captured 5 assassins so far, but intelligence suggests there may be others we haven't identified. Stay alert, trust your instincts, and don't hesitate to act if something feels wrong." Kate spoke up. "What about the Celestian guards? Will they follow our lead if something happens?" "Some will, some won't," Jake admitted. "Ravek and I have reached an understanding, but many of his warriors still don't respect human capabilities. We'll have to prove ourselves again if things go bad." The ceremony began at noon. The diplomatic hall was filled with dignitaries all dressed in formal attire. Queen Sareth sat at the center of the raised platform with Princess Vela beside her. Human Governor Patricia Wells sat on the other side, representing New Haven and the wider human colonial government. Jake positioned himself where he could watch both the crowd and the platform. His team was spread throughout the hall, each person monitoring their assigned area. The Celestian guards stood in formation near the Queen, their weapons held ceremonially but ready for use. The speeches began. Governor Wells spoke about the benefits of cooperation between species and the bright future that awaited both civilizations. Queen Sareth responded with carefully diplomatic words about mutual respect and shared goals. The actual alliance documents were brought forward on an elegant display stand. That was when everything fell apart. The attack came from within the Celestian delegation itself. 3 noble warriors, all wearing formal ceremonial armor, suddenly drew weapons that had been hidden by psychic illusions. They moved with devastating speed and coordination, targeting Queen Sareth directly. Jake saw the movement from the corner of his eye and reacted instantly. He shouted a warning and drew his weapon while launching himself toward the platform. His team responded immediately, but the Celestian guards hesitated, shocked that the attack was coming from their own people. The lead attacker, a tall warrior with scarred blue skin, fired a psychic blast at the queen. Princess Vela threw up a defensive barrier that absorbed most of the impact, but the force of it staggered her. The attacker pressed forward, drawing a blade that glowed with deadly energy. Jake reached the platform and placed himself between the attacker and the royal family. He fired his weapon 3 times, hitting the warrior's armor but not penetrating it. The Celestian turned toward him with contempt clear in his expression. "Pathetic human," the warrior snarled. "You cannot stop us." "We'll see about that," Jake replied and charged forward. What followed was the most brutal fight of Jake's life. The Celestian warrior was faster and stronger than any human, enhanced by psychic powers and wearing armor that could withstand most weapons. But Jake had trained for exactly this kind of situation, and he had something the warrior did not expect. He had no intention of backing down. Jake used every combat technique he knew, mixing martial arts with tactical shooting and pure aggressive determination. He took hits that would have dropped a normal person, his armor cracking under the force of psychic-enhanced blows. But he kept fighting, kept pressing forward, kept placing himself between the attacker and those he was sworn to protect. Behind him, the rest of his team engaged the other 2 attackers. Kate was trading fire with 1 warrior, while 2 other human officers tackled the 3rd. The Celestian guards finally overcame their shock and joined the fight, but the conspirators had chosen their position well. They had created a killing zone where firepower would endanger innocent bystanders. This meant close combat, hand-to-hand fighting where the humans were at a severe disadvantage against psychically enhanced warriors. But Jake's team did not hesitate. They pressed forward together, supporting each other, covering gaps in each other's defenses. Jake felt his ribs crack as the lead attacker hit him with a devastating punch enhanced by psychic force. He staggered, but did not fall, instead using his forward momentum to drive his combat knife toward a weak point in the warrior's armor. The blade found its mark, sinking into the joint at the shoulder. The Celestian warrior roared in pain and rage, grabbing Jake and throwing him across the platform. Jake crashed into the display stand holding the alliance documents, shattering it and sending papers flying everywhere. He forced himself to his feet, tasting blood, his vision swimming. Vela was beside him suddenly, her hands glowing with psychic energy. "Stay down, Jake, you are badly hurt." "Can't," he managed to say through the pain. "My job." She looked at him with something fierce and proud in her silver eyes. "Then we fight together." They turned to face the lead attacker together. Vela unleashed psychic blasts while Jake provided covering fire, moving to flank the warrior. Other Celestian guards finally reached the platform and engaged the attacker from the other side. It took all of them working together to finally bring the warrior down. The other 2 attackers were subdued moments later, one unconscious and the other badly wounded. The entire battle had lasted less than 3 minutes, but the diplomatic hall looked like a war zone. Furniture was overturned, decorations were destroyed, and several people were injured. Jake collapsed to one knee, his body finally giving in to the accumulated damage. His armor was cracked in multiple places, he had at least 3 broken ribs, and he was pretty sure his left arm was dislocated. But everyone under his protection was alive. Queen Sareth rose from where Ravik and his guards had shielded her. She looked at the carnage, at the captured conspirators, and finally at Jake, kneeling on the ruined platform. She walked over to him slowly, and he tried to stand, but his legs would not cooperate. "Do not rise," the queen commanded. "You have done more than enough." She knelt down so she was at eye level with him, something unprecedented for a Celestian ruler. "You took multiple wounds protecting me and my daughter. Your team fought alongside my warriors against impossible odds. I saw humans refuse to retreat even when facing enemies stronger and faster than themselves." Jake tried to find words, but his head was spinning. The queen continued, I came here believing humans were primitive, that your species had nothing to teach us. I was wrong. You have something we Celestians lost long ago. You have the ability to stand together, to sacrifice for each other, to refuse surrender even when logic says you should. She looked around at Jake's team, all of them wounded but still standing, still ready to fight if needed. This is strength. Not individual power but collective will. Not the ability to conquer, but the refusal to abandon those you protect. Queen Sareth stood and addressed everyone in the hall, her voice carrying with authority. This alliance will proceed. These attacks have shown me that we need humanity more than I realized. Not because of your technology or your resources, but because of your character. Because you know how to stand together when it matters most. She looked down at Jake again. You and your team have earned the morning after the battle, Queen Sareth stood in the diplomatic complex gardens watching the twin suns rise over New Haven. She had not slept, her mind too full of everything she had witnessed. For 2,000 years she had ruled with the certainty that Celestians were the pinnacle of civilization, that other species were inferior and needed to be guided by their betters. Yesterday had shattered that certainty completely. She heard footsteps on the stone path and turned to see her daughter approaching. Vela looked tired but peaceful, as if some burden had been lifted from her shoulders. Mother, Vela said respectfully, I did not expect to find you here. I needed to think, the Queen replied. She gestured at the gardens around them. The humans built all of this in less than 50 years. We would have spent decades planning before laying the first stone. They simply acted, built, and adjusted as they went. There is something to be said for that approach. Vela joined her mother, looking out at the city beyond the gardens. They are different from us in many ways, but those differences are not weaknesses. No, Queen Sareth agreed. They are not. She turned to face her daughter directly. Tell me honestly, Vela. This human guard of yours, Jake Morrison, what is he to you? Vela considered the question carefully. He is my protector. He is someone who has proven his loyalty through actions rather than words. He is someone I trust absolutely. Trust. The Queen repeated the word as if tasting it. When was the last time you truly trusted anyone at court? When was the last time I did? We are surrounded by schemes and political games, Vela said. Trust is a luxury we cannot afford among our own people. Perhaps that is our greatest weakness, Queen Sareth said quietly. Perhaps that is what we lost over thousands of years of civilization. We became too focused on individual power and forgot the strength that comes from genuine bonds between people. They walked together through the gardens in silence for a while. Finally, the Queen spoke again. I want you to stay on New Haven for another month. Continue working with the humans on the details of the alliance. Learn more about them, and report back to me everything you discover. Of course, Mother. Later that day, Queen Sareth visited Jake in the hospital. He tried to stand when she entered, but she waved him back down. His body was still healing from the extensive damage he had taken during the fight. Captain Morrison, she said, settling into a chair beside his bed. I wanted to thank you personally for your service. You saved my life and my daughter's life multiple times. That deserves recognition beyond formal diplomatic statements. I appreciate that, Your Majesty, Jake said. But like I told you before, I was just doing my job. You keep saying that, the Queen observed. But your job does not require you to take plasma blasts or fight warriors far stronger than yourself. Your job does not require you to refuse to retreat even when wounded. Those choices go beyond employment. Jake was quiet for a moment, then said, maybe for humans, the job and the commitment are the same thing. When we take responsibility for someone's safety, we don't measure it in terms of risk versus reward. We just do whatever needs to be done. That is a philosophy I am still trying to understand, Queen Sareth admitted. In Celestian culture, we are taught to always assess costs and benefits, to never commit more resources than necessary. Your approach seems reckless by our standards. Maybe it is reckless, Jake said. But it's also how we survive. Humans aren't the strongest or the smartest species out there. We don't have psychic powers or long lifespans. What we have is each other. We survive by refusing to abandon our people, by standing together no matter the odds. The Queen studied him with those ancient eyes. You are teaching me things I did not expect to learn from a species I considered primitive. That is humbling for someone who has ruled for 2 millennia. I don't think you're primitive, Your Majesty, Jake said with a slight smile. I just think we're different. And maybe those differences can make us both stronger if we're willing to learn from each other. Queen Sareth nodded slowly. Perhaps you are right. She stood to leave, then paused. I am returning to the Imperial capital tomorrow, but I want you to know that you have earned a place of honor in Celestian history. What you and your team did will not be forgotten. After she left, Jake lay back in the hospital bed, thinking about everything that had happened. He had signed up for a simple security job and ended up in the middle of a political conspiracy that had nearly started an interstellar incident. But somehow, through all the violence and chaos, something good had come from it. Two species had learned to respect each other. The next week passed in a blur of recovery and reorganization. Jake's team was honored in a ceremony attended by both human and Celestian officials. They received medals and commendations, though Kate joked that they would have preferred a vacation and hazard pay. Jake returned to duty as Princess Vela's guard once his injuries healed enough for him to pass the medical evaluation. She welcomed him back with obvious relief, though she tried to maintain her formal diplomatic composure. They fell back into their routine, but something had changed between them. There was an ease to their interactions now, a mutual respect that went beyond the formal relationship of protector and protected. Vela asked Jake's opinion on matters beyond security, and he found himself genuinely interested in the political and cultural aspects of the alliance negotiations. One afternoon, they were walking through the city when they encountered a group of Celestian nobles who had arrived as part of the ongoing diplomatic mission. One of them, a haughty female named Serena, looked at Jake with obvious disdain. "Princess Vela," Serena said in accented common trade language, "I am surprised you still employ this human as your guard. Surely after the incidents during the Queen's visit, you would prefer security from your own people." Vela's expression went cold. "Jake Morrison has proven his worth through his actions. He has saved my life multiple times. I trust him absolutely. But he is only human," Serena pressed. "He has no psychic abilities, no extended lifespan, none of the advantages we possess. How can such a limited creature truly protect you?" Jake remained silent, letting Vela handle the situation. He had learned that she was perfectly capable of fighting her own battles with words. "You speak of limitations," Vela said quietly, "but Jake has shown me that humans possess something we Celestians have lost. They have loyalty that does not waver, courage that does not falter, and a willingness to sacrifice for others that we have forgotten how to value. If those are limitations, then I welcome them." Serena looked shocked by this response. "You sound as if you admire them." "I do," Vela said simply. "And if you spent any time actually observing humans instead of dismissing them, you might learn something valuable as well." As they walked away from the encounter, Jake said quietly, "You're making enemies among your own people by defending humans so openly." "Perhaps," Vela agreed, "but I would rather make enemies standing up for what is right than gain friends by staying silent in the face of prejudice." 3 weeks after Queen Sareth's departure, something unexpected happened. Other Celestian nobles began requesting human security personnel. At first, it was just one or two, citing practical reasons like wanting to learn about human security methods. But soon it became a trend, as more Celestians recognized the value of having guards who viewed protection as a sacred duty, rather than just another job. Jake found himself training other humans in how to work with Celestian clients. He emphasized respect, professionalism, and the importance of proving themselves through actions. "They're going to test you," he told the new guards. "Some will look down on you, some will dismiss your capabilities. Don't argue, don't get angry. Just do your job better than they expect, and eventually they'll respect you for it." 1 month after the signing ceremony, as planned, Princess Vela prepared to return to the Imperial capital. She would continue working on the alliance from there, coordinating with human representatives and helping to implement the various agreements. On her last evening on New Haven, she invited Jake to join her for a private dinner. They sat on the balcony of her quarters watching the city lights come on as the sun set. "I want to thank you, Jake," Vela said, "not just for protecting my life, but for teaching me to see things differently. You showed me that strength comes in many forms and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stand beside someone when they need you." "You taught me some things too," Jake replied, "about patience, about seeing beyond surface differences, about the importance of building bridges between cultures." I am going to recommend to my mother that you be assigned as the Chief Human Security Advisor to the Celestian Court, Vela said. It is a position that does not currently exist, but I believe it should. Would you be interested? Jake thought about it. Leaving New Haven, going to the Imperial capital, working in an entirely alien culture. It would be challenging and sometimes difficult, but it would also be a chance to continue building the Alliance, to help humans and Celestians learn to work together. I'd be honored, he said. 2 days after Vela left, Queen Sareth sent a message requesting Jake's presence at the Imperial capital. He packed his belongings and prepared for the journey, saying goodbye to his team and the planet he had called.